So back in January of 2023, Steel City Interactive released Undisputed on PC and Steam exclusively. I bought it at launch because, believe it or not, I absolutely love boxing games. I watch the odd bit of boxing in real life, but I'm more of a I love the video games kind of guy. My favourite is, no surprise to anyone, Fight Night Champion on the Xbox 360, and that was released all the way back in 2010, and again, no surprise to anyone here, I'm going to be referencing that game quite a lot because that is the game Undisputed needs to live up to. Now, back on the PC version, it didn't have a career mode, it had exhibition match and an online match, and that was the only two modes. And it was a solid game for the most part. There were definitely a few issues, and it didn't come anywhere near, in my opinion, to the quality of Fight Night Champion. Now, in fairness, I only really played it for a 2-3 week period, and they've been constantly updating this since January of 2023. And now finally, October 2024, we have a console release that I can sit down and get my teeth stuck into. Now, it did come out early access. I picked up the physical version on the day of release, and I've already put quite a few hours into this game, working my way through the career mode. I went into just a standard exhibition match, and you'll be seeing gameplay of all of this stuff. And my first impressions are, visually, this game is fantastic. It is the best looking boxing game I have ever played. Flawless. Now, as I mentioned, I do watch the odd bit of boxing, but I don't really know that many fighters, if I'm honest. I'll know the majority of the heavyweight class, but going down, maybe the odd one. But it seems to me, though, that they have a very, very good roster of fighters. And of course, some retired and some past gone, of course. But they have a little bit of everything for everyone. Now, multiplayer is, of course, still there. You can still go online and fight other people, and you will have a ongoing record, if you will. And of course, you still have exhibition, there's a tutorial and a few other things. But now we have career mode. I have no idea how long this has been in the game, whether it's now released on PC at the same time as console, or whether it's been on PC for a number of months. But to me anyway, it's all new. The first thing I did before I went into an exhibition, before I went into training, I jumped straight into the career mode. And I'll be honest, the character creation is detailed. There is so much you can actually do to your character in terms of like molding his face, even molding his torso, even down to the legs. You can decide how big they are, how small they are, muscle in some areas, no muscle in others. You get striations on your character if you don't add too much meat to one section, if you will. It is very, very impressive, and again, the graphics lend into this and it just looks really, really good. So after about 25 minutes of creating the perfect representation of myself, or not, I dived into career mode and I was surprised. Half pleasantly and half a little bit disappointed. Not quite sure what I was expecting, if I'm honest, but this wasn't quite it. Now, the majority of career modes in boxing games tend to be you schedule your fight with an opponent. Now, in this case, you have a manager which you have to appoint, and he will get you certain fights. And then if you want to try and go for someone who's just a little bit outside the scope, there'll be a little bit of negotiating involved, and maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't. But after you schedule the fight, of course, now it's time to train. Now, the one wonderful thing about this game is it does lend into realism a lot more than Fight Night Champion. You do have to worry about your weight, which of course is a huge thing for a boxer. They have to remain inside a certain weight restriction in order to be eligible for the weight class. If you put too much weight on, there's a chance you won't be able to fight. If you're only just over, you will be able to fight, but you will be slightly more lethargic than you would normally be if you were in weight, which is really, really good. And there are ways to manage it where you can go on like a cut, or you sacrifice training 1 week because you really need to get your weight down. And I do like that. It is really good. It adds something that I've never seen in a boxing game before. It gives you something to do while you're waiting for that next fight to be scheduled. And then a few other things. I've seen this in a few games before, mainly UFC, and that is sort of hyping your fight, because you want to get more fans. The more fans you get, the more famous you are, I guess. I don't really understand the purpose of it. When it comes to the training itself, I was both happy and a little disappointed at the same time, if that's possible. So in the majority of boxing games, you have to go through training, and it'll be button combinations for bags. Even in the Creed Champions game, they have training, and my complaint there was that training does absolutely nothing. You get these button combinations when hitting a heavy bag, you go on a treadmill, you even go and hit the beef in the meat locker. And my complaint was it was all for nothing because there was no point to it. It did nothing. Well, in Undisputed, training does do something. It obviously boosts your stats. and it weighs down your energy, and then you'll need to weigh up the recovery. And it also burns fat, so you'll lose weight while working out as well, so you need to manage that. The one thing that really surprised me, and it's good and bad I guess, it depends which side of the fence you fall on, you don't actually do the training. I thought that was a little bit weird. No mini games at all. You select what you want, you can see what it does to your stats, you click a button, and brrr, it's done. I both really like that and find it a bit cheap at the same time. I always complain in boxing games when I have to go into training, I can't be bothered, I'd rather just simulate it. But in Undisputed, it just feels a little bit cheap. I know that the career mode was tagged on after the game was released, and maybe they thought, well, I'll just try and get this out as quick as possible, we'll cut a corner here, no one will really care. And I don't, but I do at the same time. It's just something that I feel like these games need, but I do still complain when it comes out. So, like I said, it does depend on what side of the fence you fall on. Now, in terms of the actual gameplay and the mechanics, which is the very most important part of a boxing game, the question is it actually any good? The controls in this game can be complex if you're not familiar with boxing games. If you are familiar with Fight Night Champion, Round 4, or any other boxing game that you may have played in the last 15 years, this should be pick up and play for the most part. The movement, the lean feature, the block, the body blows, the hooks, the uppercuts, they're all very reminiscent that of Fight Night Champion. In fact, I didn't go through a tutorial or any training, and I didn't have any problem whatsoever in learning the controls. In fact, I don't think I learned anything new in this game. It's all exactly the same as every other boxing game I've ever played. That's because EA with Fight Night Champion kind of perfected the controls. They don't need to be fixed, they don't need to be revolutionized, and Undisputed realized this, and I really do thank them for it. You have every punch variation that you could ever dream of. Some of the animations on the fighters, absolutely fantastic. Muhammad Ali, for example, he has a very distinctive movement when it comes to the ring, and I'm talking real life, of course. You watch old footage, he is so light on his feet, and the way that he moves and carries himself, it is almost inch perfect within the game. And it's the same for someone like Tyson Fury as well. He's very distinctive in the way that he moves, and in game it looks exactly the same. When it comes to playing a boxing game for the very first time, you are going to struggle. You're not going to know what button does what, you're not going to know how to play the game efficiently. Button bashing in a boxing game will only get you so far, and by far I mean about 20 seconds into the first round before you find yourself on the floor. Stamina plays a massive part in boxing, and it's no different for Undisputed. You'll have a stamina system in the bottom left. You'll need to make sure that your heart rate doesn't go over a certain amount of beats before your stamina goes really low, your punch power depletes, and you are just open, ready to be dropped, and it will happen, and it'll happen in a flash. So you need to maintain that stamina, you need to maintain that heart rate, and if you are familiar with boxing games, this is second nature. You don't even need to look at it. I don't think I looked at it outside of the first maybe 1 or 2 rounds in the very first fight because I was curious on how it worked, but as soon as you start fighting and all the memories of Fight Night Champion, for example, start coming back to you, the muscle memory is there for the controls, you know exactly what you need to do. And of course, if you watch boxing, you know that you can't just go in there and throw power punch after power punch. It's all about the jab, and the jab in Undisputed is problematic, to say the least. Now, the gameplay itself is actually very solid. We've talked about it in terms of movement and the amount of punches and the variety that you have. The animations are very good for the most part. When it comes to the jab, I found problems. I've got a 6'5" fighter with a very long jab, and if my opponent is about a meter away, it's not really a problem. He extends the jab and it lands, and it looks natural. And the AI is very good in this situation. Of course, in real life, if you have a tall fighter against a shorter fighter, the shorter fighter knows that he needs to close the gap, because of course the jab is very powerful, and if the taller fighter can use his jab and keep the shorter fighter at bay, the shorter fighter can't get anywhere near him, so he needs to close the gap. And that is a problem in this game. The shorter fighter is right up against you, you throw a jab, and rather than just throw it like that in your opponent's face because he's that close to you, the animation is almost like a full extension of that arm, which doesn't make any sense because he's right next to you. So it does this sort of weird, almost like a, you know, like the game Quap, physics-based game, you control every limb in the body sort of thing. I played a game the other day, it's just been added to Game Pass. I finished it in one sitting. It's actually a really fun game. I think it's called like Mad Streets or something. That's almost like a physics beat 'em up, and it feels like that because some of the animations, they're really wobbly in the game, and it's exactly the same in Undisputed. So you throw a jab, your opponent's right there, And rather than throw it and that's it, he goes and tries to continue the animation, but because the hitbox won't let him, the arm does this really weird bendy curly thing, and it's really quick, and sometimes you won't notice it, other times you will, but it's really unnatural and it looks horrendous. And I don't know whether that's something that will be fixed. I'm really hoping it will be, because, and again I'm going to continue to reference it because it is the best boxing game ever made. Fight Night Champion doesn't do this. Your opponent's right next to you, you get a short, sharp jab. If he's a meter away, you get a full extension of the arm. There are a couple of other small things that I do take issue with, but if they could fix that one problem that I seem to have with this game, and that's the weird animations and the whole jab length thing, and you do get that with the odd hook and a few other like uppercuts and things like that. If they can fix the animations and make it so that you make contact a lot shorter, it doesn't continue to try and drive the animation forward, this game gets elevated a few levels in my estimation. It becomes a really good game. The only other thing I feel like they need to work on gameplay wise then is the impact of punches. I don't feel like the impact of the punch is felt as much as it should be. And this isn't just a Fight Night Champion thing, this is any fighting game, whether it be Street Fighter or whether it be a game like this, a realistic simulation of boxing, or UFC for example. In UFC, I feel it every time I make contact with my opponent. There's an impact there. You can make the argument of course that they have boxing gloves on in a boxing game and the impact isn't going to sound or feel as impactful as it would in UFC, where they just have like a very small layer of foam over some fingerless gloves. I get it, it makes sense, but it's a video game and I need to feel that impact. I need to feel like I'm making contact and I'm doing damage. But the biggest thing for me is the knockdowns. I don't actually know when I've knocked my opponent down. There's no real indicator. So when you watch the replay, 9 times out of 10 you'll see me continuing to throw punches because I don't know I've knocked my opponent down. If they can fix those two problems, this game is going to be something special. The career mode is definitely lacking something, and I think it might be the training if I'm honest. The whole trainer thing is good, the weight is fantastic. Why no other boxing game has ever tried to do that, I'll never know. The fact that training isn't in there, I feel like is a little bit of a cop-out. It's just them trying to cut a corner. I don't necessarily hate it, but at the same time, it would have been nice to have seen it. And nothing could ever compete really with the story mode of Fight Night Champion, and that's not really what I'm comparing because that is just in a league of its own. But the champion mode in Fight Night Champion, which is essentially just the career mode, is probably on par with this because they have training and they have a very good point system. This is a little bit more in depth in certain areas but not so much in others. It's a solid effort if I'm honest, and I will enjoy doing it and going up, and of course there are several belts to fight for, loads of different opponents, and it is a solid experience. And of course I'm nowhere near finishing it yet, so I'll report back if I encounter any problems or things that I really enjoy about it. I don't know the roadmap for Undisputed and whether they have plans to tweak gameplay even further, because of course this game came out in 2023 originally and it is a lot different now to what it was then, in fairness. If you've played Undisputed, feel free to let me know what you think in the comment section. Despite the fact that I've bashed it a little bit here or there, I actually think it's a solid game and it is very close to being up there with Fight Night Champion for gameplay. If you'd like to check out another video from me though, you can click here, and until the next time, goodbye.